Hey, Isharna, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Really nice to be here.
Absolutely. You just said that you're in Australia.
Correct. Yes, I'm actually half Sri Lankan, half Australian, and I've been here during the pandemic.
Oh my goodness. Is that normally where you live, or did you kind of get stuck there?
So I usually live in LA. The team is in California. The business is in California. But COVID craziness. My mum actually was a bit sick at the start of the pandemic. She's okay now, but I came back to look after her, and then everything went crazy. So it just ended up staying.
What's it like having a team in California, but you're living in Australia? Is the time zones too different, like very different, or is it just functional, like regular virtual world?
It's a bit difficult. So during summer, it was 5 hours, but like a day apart. So that was actually pretty manageable, except for I just work Saturday in Australia, which can be a little shit. Sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Now it's 7 hours, which is a bit rough. Like it's 7 a.m. here, and I've been working for an hour already. So yeah,
Oh my
but
God.
it's not the end of the world. It's manageable.
Yeah, and how it happens, man. Are you coming back to the States, you think?
Yes.
All right.
End of July, now that everyone's vaccinated and things are opening up. Yeah,
Yes.
really
And if
keen to
you're
see my team.
listening and you are not vaxxed, go get vaxxed. And if you need
Yes,
help getting vaxxed, call me. I'll help you get vaxxed. Everyone needs to
yes.
be vaccinated,
Please get vaccinated, everyone.
please. Well, let's, I'm so interested to hear your background with your like multiracial and like you're living in Australia, but the company's in California. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All right. Take me back to square one. So tell us about your background. Where are you from? Did you go to school for something else? And how did you, end up here?
Yeah, so I'm, as I mentioned, I'm half Sri Lankan, half Australian, born in Sri Lanka, raised in Australia. Um, Very, very far from Silicon Valley, very far from tech. Had really no intention when I was at college of going into technology. I wanted to do a career that was in some way related to public service or social impact. I tried being a lawyer. I tried working for government. I worked for the Prime Minister in economic policy. I have an economics degree, a law degree. Um, Recognized that maybe those environments weren't the best for me. So I was really curious about business and the opportunity to use business as a force for social change. And that was really the driving force for me through my mid 20s, late 20s. And that's what led me to tech. So I was just really fascinated by how technology was shaping the way we interact with the world and
Mhm.
each other. So through sort of a circuitous path, I got from law, economics to tech. Worked for a technology company as a director of operations and then as a venture capitalist at a fund in LA before founding Coral.
Ooh, I really relate to that story. I was doing my PhD in a laboratory and said, oh my gosh, I have way too much personality to work in the sterile lab my whole life. What the heck am I going to do? Right. And
Yes.
entrepreneurship is a great place for people who don't like, that we like variety. We like surprises.
We
Usually we are people who are like, please don't put more rules
need
on
to
me.
move fast.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, tell us
Yeah. What was your
about
PhD in? Just out of
genetics.
curiosity.
Genetics, yeah.
Cool.
Crazy nerd here. For those watching on YouTube, got my DNA tattoo on my bicep, like nerd
Wow.
to the top. Really, really, really
Yeah.
nerdy. Um, well, how did you get into femtech? When did you first hear about it?
So essentially, I founded Coral out of this really deep desire to alleviate suffering, essentially. Like it was like so many people struggling in relation to sex and intimacy. And I believed that I could create something that would really help. So it wasn't necessarily like, hey, I want to build a femtech business and like what's around. It was more like I saw this huge problem that actually is worse generally for women, and then build a business around that.
Mm-hmm. Was it problem? And you don't have to share this, but was it a problem for you or like your friends or?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
So happy to share. I got to sort of 26, 27 and realized I was in a long-term relationship that I had no idea how to talk about sex. I had no idea what was normal. We had hit that inevitable place where like you just don't want to have sex as much as you used to. And we had no idea what to do about it. And now with the education and knowledge and sort of experience that I've had since then, I recognize, oh my God, that is so normal. And there are so many things that you can do about it.
Yeah.
But at that time, I was completely clueless. And it was that journey of sort of unpacking that in myself that led to the foundation of understanding that then meant that I started the business, because I was like, this is crazy that so many people feel this way. And like, we don't do anything to change
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And 26, beautiful, attractive, like multi, and it's like, how is my sex life not on fire right now? Right. Is that kind of how you felt?
Actually, it was more, how do I say this? It's like emotionally devastating in a way, because, it was more around like shame, not understanding if there was something wrong with me, not understanding if there was something wrong with my relationship, like more around, this was someone that I deeply loved and we weren't connecting in a way that was foundational for our relationship, but
Yeah.
didn't have the tools or the language to navigate that.
Yeah.
So I think it was more from that angle of almost like pain.
Yes. Wow. Well, that pain's a motivator. And most
Yes.
femtech companies are, women solving their own problems. So what is Coral? When exactly did you start to make it, and what is it?
So Coral is your trusted guide to create a happier and healthier intimate life, however that looks for you. So essentially, if you think about the way society sets us up in relation to sex and intimacy, we are all set up to fail. There is not the right context. We're taught shame. We're taught it shouldn't be talked about. We're taught that, from teenage young years, like to hide it away. And then we're given insufficient or inappropriate education. So particularly in the US, only, I think it's, have to fact check me on this, but 23 states require sex ed to be medically accurate.
It's so crazy.
So, like, you're literally being taught the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Like fake news. And then on top of that, there's a lot of abstinence only sex ed, which basically is just like, don't have sex. And then we're meant to go and build these rich, intimate relationships. And then on top of that, the way that most of us are learning about sex and intimacy is through porn, and the media. And that gives us completely inaccurate representations of how sex and intimacy actually work in real life. So we're all set up to fail. And then when you look at the data, most of us are really struggling. Like over 50% of people feel some level of sexual dissatisfaction. And so what we've created is essentially a tool that you can use to provide you a facilitated intimate connection with a partner. So we have a chat feature that basically prompts you to help you prioritize and connect in a more deep way within your relationship. Even if you're single, we've also got a bunch of basically sex positive, science-based, expert vetted sex ed, from everything from desire to arousal to communication to expanding your pleasure. And then in addition to that, there's community, so you can really hear other people's experiences and learn from them, share your own, because that can be very powerful. And then also guided exercises, which are probably the most fun bit, where we guide you from something to from a meditation to connect to pleasure, all the way through to, guided partner play, like guided oral sex, guided self-pleasure, a lot of fun things that you can use to bring novelty into your solo or partner play.
Oh my goodness, that sounds amazing. I want to back up a hot second. So you grew up in Australia, right?
Yeah.
So this sounds like it's a global issue. It's not like just a US issue, even though the statistics you gave us and US is so bad about, I mean, I lived in Europe before, so I know what it's like to, be in a culture where women's breasts are on TV or, and that's normal and whatever. But in the United States, it's like, oh, God forbid I wear a tank top to work, like, oh no.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you were in Australia and you still were not brought up with the right sexual education or awareness of what intimacy could look like. I also want to add, like, I feel like a lot of people say we learn about sex from porn or sex ed. I also feel like a lot of women learn about sex or like physical touch through abuse, And I mean, what a terror, like porn obviously is not what intimacy should look like, but abuse is absolutely not what intimacy should look like. And so I wonder, like, what percentage of your users are, survivors, learning about how to actually be intimate. Do you know anything about that? Is that like a community thing that shows up in your app or yeah?
Yeah, actually. So one of the most difficult tranches of content, or like courses is a better way of putting it. One of the most difficult courses we've created, but the ones we're most proud of, is in relation to healing your trauma. So initially I was very hesitant to include content like that in the app because I didn't know how we could facilitate a safe environment when we were not a trained therapist in the room with the person, being unsure of how, whether or how we might be triggering them, how we could hold their hand and take them on a safe journey. But it's just such a huge issue, and we couldn't ignore it because we knew that so many of our community would have experienced trauma.
Yeah.
And so we've actually created content that is specifically for that experience. We've got a course called Heal My Trauma. We worked with a somatic therapist, Dr. Holly Richmond, who helped us create essentially grounding content that is designed to give people tools to manage their trauma and the consequences of the trauma they've experienced. And so we can see, like, we ask people if they would like to opt into that as well as an app experience that contains a lot of trigger warnings. So we created quite a personalized experience. And so we have versions of the content basically where if you've experienced trauma, we have trigger warnings on a bunch of the content to make sure that we're just like facilitating a safe space. And it's a significant number. It's in line with the data. So around a third of female identifying or women. And I think it's around a sixth of men. Click yes, please, I'd like to have that experience.
That is so important. I mean, like, it's a huge issue for women, but men are not allowed to talk about it. So it's even a bigger issue, I feel like, I mean, proportionally it's women, but, in terms of safe spaces or being able to even acknowledge it. So it sounds like your app really is for all genders.
Yes. We also have trans and gender diverse specific content. And we're very conscious to basically, and it's really difficult. The team has spent a lot of time on it. Like, just really being conscious around the way we use language to not alienate or create any body dysmorphia for our trans and gender diverse users.
Totally. Well, so tell us, what is healthy sexual intimacy? Like, what is that? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I feel like one of the things in this space is, like, we each have our own experiences, but we don't know, like, it's hard to know what's out there. Like, I had having this conversation with a friend the other day. She was like, well, I think it was great sex, but I'm kind of curious because, like, what kind of sex are you having? I was
How long does yours last? How long is normal?
Yeah, what's going on? What are you experiencing in there? And so I think, like, when you think about healthy sexual intimacy, there's two key parts of it, right? So, like, one is the ability to stay really present in the moment, being in touch with your own sexual self, like comfortable with your relationship to yourself. And look, I think for some people that does require emotional intimacy, like, so really needing to be with someone that you know super well in order to be wholly present. But for some people, you know, you can do that with a one night stand, and that's totally fine. And then I think the other really key part of real intimacy is the ability to explore a wide range of dynamics with yourself or with a partner without self-judgment. So like, you know, comfort in yourself, being able to sort of express yourself sexually without having to conform to what you've been told to want. It's like a sense of sexual agency. And I think from those two key points, so the sort of ability to be present in what's going on and the comfort and lack of self-judgment or judgment of your partner in the experience, then you can really get into healthy sexual intimacy, because you kind of navigate the dynamic from a place of acceptance and connection. And I'm not just talking in the bedroom, I'm talking like the whole sex is not just in the bedroom. Sex is everything that feels intimate and sexual throughout your life. So I think those are the two key elements.
I love that. Well, you know, I share very openly. Sorry, y'all. If you hear Q, he's on our little Q bear is on my lap here, and he's doing that little dog sneeze thing. So please excuse that weird noise in the background here as we talk about intimacy and sex.
Brady's like, excuse me, guys.
He's like, I got something to say about this, okay? First, I share openly on this podcast, and you know, I felt like when you mentioned those two things, the first one, I'm like, oh, I think I'm doing that really well, like being present. And I used to not do it very well because I am a survivor of sexual trauma, and I once had a boyfriend who, after, you know, we're dating for like 2 or 3 months, and he was like, hey, like, do you think we can have sex just as ourselves? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, like, we're just always role playing, like always, you know, like, can we just be Brittany and, you know, I won't disclose who it was, but it was like huge. It was monumental for me because I did not realize that I was always like, oh, let's be kinky, which I love kink, y'all. Like, go get your BDSM on. But for me, it was actually a way to not be present, you know? And that was just like huge for me. And so like, that was really cool. Now, on the other hand, I do think I still struggle with like being comfortable in my body. So like, I still struggle to orgasm from oral sex. And like, that's an issue because, you know, and I tell my partners, listen, sometimes I fake it. And like, I'm not upset about it. I just feel like it's in the flow and I do it, but like, I wish I didn't feel obligated to. Like, somewhere inside me feels like he's probably tired and like I should probably just like get this over with or something, you know? So I think
many women or people with vulvas can definitely relate to that story.
Yeah. You're like, girl, I'm gonna send you a promo code. You're like, you need my app.
100%. Well, one thing that you can do is just promise to yourself to never fake another orgasm. It's like
I could.
It's a nice place to start.
I'm not there yet.
just saying to someone, that was really nice, thank you. Like,
yeah.
To end it.
I need to download your app. That's what I need to do. Let's talk about how women and men navigate differently. So how do women navigate their sex life differently than men? Do you know have any stories about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting, right? So biologically, there's actually more similarities between genders than there are differences. So like obviously we have like different genitals, but the clitoris and the vulva and like the structure of the clitoris is actually it's like a homologue, it's called, to a penis. So basically it was formed out of the same like tissues when in the womb. So like the clitoris is actually kind of very similar to the head of a penis. They just grew differently. So I think when it comes to differences in our experiences of sexuality, so if we're talking about the gender binary, cis women, cis men, a lot of the differences are cultural and societal expectations. They're not due to our biology. So women are taught about sex in very different ways than men, and please, I'm using cis women, cis men. So generally, women are gatekeepers, men are pursuers. I do think this is changing now. So you see that in the younger generation. That I think, if you look at 16 to 21-year-olds, it's a bit of that dynamic is very different to, I'm 33.
Different.
Yeah. So I think because of, for I don't know how old you are.
I am about to be 30.
Similar age, yeah. So I think for our generation, that means that I think cis women have a harder time of getting to a place of being really in touch with themselves sexually, in terms of like what you just described, like, this is my experience and that's just the way that it is, and I don't owe you anything as if I'm in a hetero partnership, like as my male partner, like your ego is irrelevant to my experience. Like that's very hard for us to get to. Self-judgment around self-expression, but also there's like a bunch of stuff that this doesn't serve men either, so they have a very difficult time of getting and feeling comfortable with sex being very emotional, comfortable feeling a depth of emotion around sex. So these expectations actually impact all of us, but just in really different ways.
Definitely. I mean, the pressure on men is absolutely real. And us at Femtech Focus, we love our men, like we are not anti-men here, because, we know that, and I've dated men like this, that they had a lot of insecurities about how long they last or how big they were, or, like all of that stuff is an issue for them. Just like women are like, I'm not skinny enough, or my booty's not big enough. And it's like, right. So men, we see you. There's
actually a really interesting stat around just that, like the length of the lasting longer. So I can't remember the exact stats, but essentially men think that their partners want them to last longer, and in hetero relationships, and women are like, no, I don't want them to last longer. And there's this like real disparity in perception. Like it's like, no, I don't want this to last longer. And then men are like, oh, I need to keep going forever. And it's like, oh man.
And the women are like, hey, chop.
Yeah. I'm done.
Friction is real. Okay. I got lower back problems. Okay.
Yeah. Please use lube, everyone. Always.
Use the lube.
If you take anything away from this podcast, just use lube.
Always use lube. Always. Never try to stick it in dry, y'all. Don't do that. No one likes that. And then also, what I hear you saying is there's like this generational difference, right? So, one time I was talking to my mom about my sister was having a son, and I said, what do you think? Do you think she's going to circumcise him? And my mom was like, oh, of course she is. Oh my God, uncircumcised penis is disgusting. Because she's a 56-year-old woman in the United States. And like, that's the generation she said she never even seen one. And then maybe TMI, I don't think she's going to listen.
I've never seen an uncircumcised penis.
But yeah, I don't think my mother's ever seen one, right? She's like, meanwhile, like, Ma, half the dicks I see are uncircumcised, like at least half. And I think that
I find that really, for an Australian, like we don't have that culture. Like, I don't think many American people know this, but it was so funny because I went on exchange to Italy, and there were some American students there, and I remember the women just being so shocked that like she hooked up with this woman, she hooked up with an Italian guy, and she was like, oh my God, his dick wasn't circumcised, and I was like, what?
You're like, what?
I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a circumcised penis at that age. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's actually, this is a whole nother episode, but I, consider that genital mutilation, but we'll just put a pin in that. We'll have another episode, but, and then I guess the new generation, I recently met my friend. She has a 16-year-old daughter who is a demi boy, pansexual demi boy. And I was like, whoa, tell me more. What is that? And so like the newer generation is just totally expanding their concept of like, what is sexuality? What is gender? Don't put me in that box. And so I can see that is likely going to spill over into their sex lives. And I hope that it's liberating in their sex life and doesn't complicate it, make it more difficult for them? What do you think? Do you see any trends in terms of like age of people using your product?
Yeah, so we actually, when we built Coral, I had assumed that we were speaking to an audience that was a bit more mature. So, like us or me at that point, 26 plus in a longer term relationship, generally at a point where they want to do some self-reflection and self-improvement, and had felt some of the pain points that I had felt and were looking for solutions. What we're seeing though is we have a really big cohort of users, sort of 20 to 25. And I actually think that's because of porn. So, my age, probably, I'm not sure about you. So I'm right on the cusp. Depends when your internet bandwidth got good in your hometown. But I didn't grow up with ubiquitous porn.
Yeah.
Right. But the generation younger did. And so I think they're becoming more porn literate in that they're understanding that potentially the sex that they're seeing in porn is not real sex, but they're not getting many resources that actually tell them what is. And so when they come across Coral, they're like, oh, okay, maybe this can help me understand, I'm with someone potentially that I really care about. I might be in my first serious relationship and I'd like to be a good partner to that person. Or, I'm now exploring sexuality and I've gotten past my teenage, fumbles, and I'm still an embodied sexual human who's still a bit confused about what's meant to actually be going on. So
yeah. I'll be 30 in about 2 weeks. I mean, I can remember in high school, a friend had a DVD of porn and was like, you can borrow it for the weekend. And it was like, oh, and it was just one DVD. And then in college, I had a BlackBerry. It didn't have data on it, Right. I think it had data on it, but it wasn't streaming videos. That's not, no. And then it was in grad school that I started to look it up on my iPhone, but you're right. That's, this generation, the 20-year-olds now, they grew up with the streaming service. The 5G is here. So interesting.
Yeah, there's a really interesting article in the New York Times actually a couple of days ago about how if you're not talking to your kids about porn, you're basically like an ostrich with your head in the sand. Your children have watched porn. So you should be talking to them about it.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. It's kind of scary actually, but okay. Wow. I'm glad we have products like yours. What is some of the future goals for Coral?
So currently we are, a subscription content app where you sign in, you create an account, you can continue on a free version or pay for the premium access. Firstly, we just want to expand that offering. We want to grow as a business. We want to do that for more people. My pipe dream, we're very much a mission-driven organization, and I would love for us to expand to other countries, particularly countries that have even less access to education than people in the Western world. So, for example, I would love to take Coral to India, to places where sex education is even less prevalent.
Yeah.
And then continuing to expand our offering and make the product much more intelligent. So, for example, now we do offer a degree of personalization, but with more resources and a bigger team, we can make content recommendations way more intelligent. Get the I can't currently surface to you the discussion forums that you might be the most interested in, because that's a layer of complexity in the app that we just haven't had the resources and team to build. So yeah, it's impact driven. How do we really expand our mission in the world, and then how do we increase the value that we're adding more and more and more to each and every person that we touch? So those are the two key things. When I think about 5-10 years, I would love to, for example, create a Coral for teens. That would be, again, when I think about impact and how we can combat some of the toxic influences in our lives, that would be a really powerful thing that I would love to do. I think the team's super excited about that sort of thing as well. So That's just a couple of things.
Love it. Is Coral funded? Is it venture backed or is it crowdfunded, self-funded?
We are venture backed. So raised a small pre-seed round in 2018 and then a seed round in 2019.
What was that like pitching a sexual wellness app? Did you find it to be like excruciating? Fundraising is hard in general. So I'm not asking you if it was hard. I'm asking, that's a given. That's yes. But was it, well, did you have any unique experiences pitching this type of a product?
Oh yeah, I think so. So it's interesting because I've been on the other side of the table as an investor for a year or year and a half. So at least I went into that process kind of equipped with a bit of understanding of like what I needed to say, and like for any entrepreneurs out there, like if you want venture funding, you have to be pitching $1 billion idea, like end of story. If you can't articulate how your business can get there, then don't even bother. It's a waste of your time. So like I knew that sort of stuff going in, and I have to say for female founders particularly, like we struggle to do that because we struggle to say we have that like rapacious ambition, but you have to carry that energy into that fundraise process. So yeah, I felt strong there. The difficulty is, 90-95% of venture capitalists are white men. 40%, by the way, which people don't talk about, went to Harvard and Stanford. So if you think about that, yeah, it's crazy.
Oh my God, I didn't know that statistic.
Just the extent of the privilege, and like, think about who they fund. They fund their friends, right? So like, I'm a brown female founder from Australia. So I'm not quite their pattern match of success. But I think the difficulty is with anyone pitching a sexuality related business, and like I'm here to help anyone if you want to talk about it, is around like how you navigate the inherent emotions that you're going to bring up in the person that you're pitching to. So if that person is having personal issues with their wife, or like there's some other sensitivity, maybe they have experienced trauma, like there might be something in that dynamics of the emotions that is you're touching on a lot of personal things that you're not sure how to navigate during a conversation about business. So that was definitely a sensitivity and a nuance that was I didn't realize that I would have to navigate going in, that became very apparent through the process.
Do you feel like so I had a DNA-based dating app, and it was based on pheromones and genetics, and pheromones have to do with sex and orgasms. And so I made it very scientific and less like, more like soulmate using science and less like science for sex kind of dating app. But nevertheless, I had to watch my words, because I did find that if I went down the sex route, VCs found it like, oh, we're allowed to like be inappropriate now because she said sex, and pheromones and attraction and sweat. And so now I'm allowed to like make comments about, sweat and sex. And I'm like, no, that's, like the door is opened in a professional way, not, and like just because that word was said, it does not mean that you're allowed to speak like that now. But I didn't think about it in the other way, which is like, you could actually trigger some people in the room, right? If there is a man in there who's, not, able to get an erection or whatever, but although there's Viagra, he can be taken care of, right? So interesting.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, but that's the thing. So yeah, when you talk about like performance issues, so Coral does help like men who are experiencing erectile difficulty. Like we have a whole tranche of mindfulness exercises and things like that for people who don't want to medicate and actually want to address the cause rather than the symptoms. We can help with that. So you can talk about that quite explicitly so that they can relate to your product, right? Because that's a big part of it, is getting the investor to really relate to what you're providing. But you have to be careful because they might not want to admit that they can relate to that. So you have to pick examples that like
secretly relating. Yes.
40% of men experience performance difficulties.
Not me. Not me.
That's a really big, it's a very big market. Over 50% of people are sexually bored.
Raise your hands.
But actually, that's a dynamic that, again, for any entrepreneurs who are listening, like, you know, and I think I have to be tactical about this for the next round of funding, like thinking about, is this a fund where the partner who decides that you're a good investment has to go back to their partner group and advocate for your product and get consensus from their partner group? Because if they're advocating for your kind of product in that setting, it's like another hurdle for them.
That's right.
So
oh my God. Yes. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Because, all right, so y'all listen up, listen to this. Okay. There's the people who make the decisions on the investment in your startup likely are not the people hearing your pitch. It is the venture partners or venture associates that are hearing your pitch, and they have a weekly meeting with the general partners and they have to pitch the deals. And if we only have men in the room and we have a femtech company that's doing incontinence and the product has to go between your labias and the general partners say, what's a labia? Like, that's why I think there are just like so many layers that of barriers to getting funding for women's health. And that is one of them, is that the person who you need an advocate inside the VC fund that's can say, this is what a woman's vulva is, and this is why it's needed, and not be like, oh God, I'm so embarrassed, I'm not going to pitch it. You know, I'm just going to pass because I don't know, or I'm embarrassed, or my boss is inappropriate and I don't want to say the word vagina because he's going to make some joke or something, right? And so I'm so excited for, obviously I'm getting super pumped out right now. I'm so excited to have our venture fund, Coyote Ventures, where, you know, we're going to have an office where there's a giant clitoris statue in the front doorway, you know, like, I don't know.
Yes.
You know, like when we're like $100 million fund, we'll get an office with the statue, but you know, it's going to be an office space where we talk about this thing every single day. And it's like not an issue. Right. Oh.
And there are so few spaces, like there really are. When I think about that seed raise, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But I have to say, like, I've seen a big shift in the last 2 years, particularly in the conversation around sexual wellness. Like when I started this, everyone was like,
God bless you.
What? What are you talking about? And then now people are like, sexual wellness, such a like great industry. It's going to grow so quickly.
You're like, okay, whatever, get on board, send me your money.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, guess who started years ago?
Well, this has been so amazing. I want to ask you 2 questions that our listeners really love. The first one is, we have a lot of aspiring femtech founders that listen. So what's an area in women's health and wellness that still needs innovating?
I just think there's such a huge opportunity around menopause. Like, it's like this incredibly intense thing that women go through, all of us, and the solutions to like make it easier, even just the conversation around it, like, like it's kind of a shame. Like, I think there's still shame around it, like, because it's like, oh, like I'm getting older and I'm not like a fertile woman anymore, so it's a big life transition, but there's such shame around aging, so like all of that. And then there's so many ways in which you can ease the transition for people because they're dealing with such intense physical changes, and they're just expected to go about their day. So I think there's like a huge area of opportunity there. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been through it myself, so it would feel a bit not genuine in a way for me to work on it, I think, but I would be super down to partner with an older female entrepreneur, like in another business, to work on some of the things there.
Love it. And what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
Oh, that is a great question. This is kind of a like frustrating answer, but this is something that I personally experienced myself. I think we just need more successful female-led businesses, basically. Like success begets success when people see that you can build really successful businesses in this space, then more people are going to build more businesses in this space. So it's like one thing I found that's been frustrating is just like, it's just harder for us right now. But being a pioneer in this space, which most of your listeners will be, unfortunately, because despite us being half the population and it being 2021, like, you know, this is a nascent area. You know, it's just harder for us, but it being harder for us will make it easier for the people that are coming up behind us, right? Like later in time. So it's just going to be more women like your listeners going for it, building successful businesses, and then that will help the next wave of entrepreneurs after them.
Yeah. Well, stay tuned. We are actually putting out a publication that includes an analysis of all the Femtech exits. So there's actually been 102 Femtech exits since 1990. And it was like one a year for a while. And then the last few years, it's been growing and growing and growing and growing. And like, like 25 of the 102 exits happened last year. And so we have there's definitely a PR issue where like, why doesn't everyone know about this? PitchBook only shows 50 of the 102. Like, what's happening there? But yeah, you're right.
How did you get that data?
Femtech girl.
Good on you. That's awesome.
A lot of reading articles and just putting it into a Google Sheet until I realized my Google Sheet was better than PitchBook. And I was like, damn, we need to publish this. So hopefully that's out by the time this episode airs. So y'all go to femtechfocus.org and click the resource tab to see this database. It's super dope. And we need to share it. We need to share it because that is the data that hopefully, if someone at the VC fund doesn't want to say the word vagina, they can say unicorn instead, because we've had 4 unicorns at least. So that's what'll move us forward. I love it. Well, this has been so awesome. Thanks so much for all of you do. Thank you so much for, spending a little time with me so early in the morning to be talking about, orgasms and all these things.
Well, thank you for all the work that you do. It's really, really great. I really appreciate it. I love it.
Pleasure.
So nice to spend some time with you as well.